Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
We made this.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We are Starfleet, a Star Trek Discovery podcast. I am your host, Mike Slamer, and with me is Ian Buckley. And today we are going to be discussing the latest episode from Star Trek Discovery, The Examples. The 5th episode airing December 16, 2021. This is the 47th episode of Discovery. What did you like this was a great episode, Ian, and I want to ask you, what did you think about all of these new guest stars and guest cast that we had introduced?
Oh, I mean, I really enjoyed it. Sean Doyle, who we were introduced to as the fairly arrogant Dr. Ruon Tarka. I thought it was pretty cool that we saw a Ryzen Doctor. We do get a little bit of the sort of Star Wars effect with some of the races in Star Trek, where they're kind of defined in a fairly narrow range of roles in society and personality traits. Like, you think about how unique and different it was to see that Ferengi scientist in that episode of Next Gen. I don't remember the name of it, but it was unusual because we don't usually see members of that race have anything other than like some sketchy, twisted plan. They're defined by these sort of narrow character traits and very money driven. And the Ryzens similarly have this reputation as being like just basically like a tourism planet and a tourism society and a society dedicated to like the pleasures of life and relaxation and luxury and all of that, and just hedonism basically. And he explicitly rejects that and sort of stands out as being sort of singular in his society. At least that's the sort of presentation he gives.
Yeah, having a Ryzen be the scientist was really cool, and we still don't really see a Klingon scientist or a Klingon doctor.
Yeah, I'm
They're very one-note races.
Still waiting on that. Yeah, presumably they exist somewhere.
So. Yeah, and I was thinking while watching this episode, Ryza, as you mentioned, it's a pleasure planet. It's a vacation destination. It's a resort world. And, the Ryzens themselves are very much dedicated to the hospitality, right? And I'm thinking, as a hospitality-minded individual, it's very customer servicey and people pleaser. And Tarka is none of that. He is not a people pleaser, and he is not here to cater to your needs.
No, he explicitly rejects that in his personality too, which I don't think is a coincidence. I don't think that's accidental. I think that feeling like an outcast in this society that's so concerned with the needs and feelings of others, like he was like, well, I don't like this society, so I'm going to act nothing like it.
Right. We also have a indigenous Canadian actor.
Michael Greyeyes, yeah.
Michael Greyeyes plays Felix in this episode, and I loved his character, his portrayal. I absolutely love the representation of a First Nations individual on Star Trek in a big way. And I thought this was really helpful. And just the general philosophy that Felix, as the character, espoused, where he was expressing his remorse for the things that he did, which we'll get into a little bit later, really stuck with me. And it really felt authentic.
Oh, yeah, and very fitting with, we sort of talked a little bit off mic before we started recording how this storyline that he's involved in felt pretty classic Trek, and
very much.
Yeah, I felt like I have seen, and I don't mean this as a criticism. I feel like I've seen versions of this character, sort of iterated in Trek, and I really appreciated his performance. I felt the authenticity of it, and yeah, I was really pleased to see both him and since we're talking of guest stars, we had our other local Canadian guest star back, David Cronenberg, this week as well.
Yes. And we can't forget Jet Reno.
Of course. No, Tig Notaro was back, thankfully, finally. It only took 5 episodes.
Right?
Yeah. I know that, getting away for filming around her schedule is tricky. They always say, we know she's a fan favorite. She'll be back as much as her schedule allows. And I'm just glad we finally got her back.
Yeah. This whole episode felt very much like The Next Generation, with the storyline that they had going, the main driver of the plot with an evacuation involved, and just the character dynamics, and of course having these eccentric scientists getting together. Really exciting stuff. Directed by Lee Rose, written by Carol Jarrow. Ian, I also have to ask you, this season we've been getting a lot of hints and a lot of drop-ins of Star Trek Enterprise references. And let me ask you, are you picking this up?
In terms of what? Can you be a little bit more specific?
Sure. So we had the Archer theme and the Archer space dock. Right. There have been little hints here and there.
We also had a Janeway reference.
Right. We have the NX-01 inside of a snow globe.
We did, yes.
That Tilly passed off to Adira.
Yes, that I did notice.
And now with the now with the whole plot as we're moving forward into the DMA, it seems like it could be a sphere of some sort, some kind of maybe advanced race here, a Type 2 civilization that can harness the energy of a sun. We know the sphere builders can do that, and they were one of the driving entities behind the Xindi back in Star Trek Enterprise.
Well, yeah, they ended up creating the Delphic Expanse because of the activity of the spheres, and I don't remember whether that was ever resolved. I believe there was a one of the sort of glimpses into the future that show provided was I believe they did reference that conflict coming to an end at some point in the future. I'm very fuzzy on the details because I only saw that episode once. But I that's my recollection, is that conflict came to some sort of end at some point in the future, which would be this show's, few hundred years in the past. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it would be interesting if that race kind of came back into the fold. Certainly something along that line, that level of advancement. But, that's the sort of the thing that... The thing that would confuse me about that plot line is that it's implied, I think, by Enterprise that in the future, the sort of 2700s, 2800s, whenever the future of that show is, the Federation has kind of come to technological parity with the Sphere Builders. That's why they're doing this thing in the past. And so if the Federation has already caught up technologically with the Sphere Builders by the 2700s, I don't really see them being behind what's going on right now.
Okay.
Does that logic track to you?
It certainly does. It certainly does. And you could be bang on right there.
But I think it's an
but the other
interesting
reason,
idea, and you're definitely right to call out that like that seems like something that they could be hinting at because of these little Enterprise references. That said, they've been doing a pretty good job of name checking like other series as well, and doing little references here and there, and so. I don't want to read too much into what they're doing with that until we get a little bit more information.
well, I'm going to ask you to read a little bit more into it because the species that we are out to save on this asteroid colony are the Akali, who were first introduced in Enterprise episode Civilization.
That's true.
So it's really hard to ignore all of these little drop-in references. And this was the big one that made me pivot and think, okay, they're tying something into the story of Enterprise here. And maybe not. Maybe this season is all just a ton of fan love to Enterprise fans.
Hey, and it's not outside of the realm of possibility that they are doing this as a sort of a misdirect, a red herring. I know that there were fans who, when the whole Control storyline was playing out, were like, oh, maybe this is somehow related to the Borg somehow. Maybe they're going to tie this all in, and I kind of rejected that at the time, and I think that the fandom might be a little bit too eager to latch onto all of these little signs and signals that are being given because of these references. And I get it. Sure. I understand it. Like, we're Trek fans. We obsess over details. That's what we do. So I get the impulse. I would need to see a little bit more.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
But it's intriguing. It's intriguing because that's a race that we really didn't get to explore that much of. Certainly not in terms of their motivations, other than we understood at some point in, the future of that show, they came into conflict with the Federation and were fairly equal matches, at least at that time period. But we've also been introduced to the concept of time manipulation and time travel. So, like, is this a future iteration?
Several times over.
Like, is this a future iteration of this race that is now, once again, just like they did in Enterprise, going back in time and meddling with things in the past, their past. I'm going to admit, like, I don't know if this show, which has already leapt so far into the future of the 32nd century, also needs to grapple with, like, and even further in the future, we've got this thing going. Like, I think that might be a story bridge too far, but who knows? There could be some stuff going on with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the further we get out from our current point in history, like we are in the year 2021, the USS Discovery 1031A is in the year 3180 something, 85?
Yeah, late 32nd century.
Yeah. And if we are to jump even further out, it's really hard to how do you get right with the technology, and how do you showcase we are in fact in the future? What does the future even mean anymore?
Right. It just becomes all abstraction at that point.
At that point, I'd rather watch Dune or Foundation, where it's literally 10,000 years in the future and it can be completely different and unrecognizable.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So here we go. The examples. Tell me, how many tribbles are you giving this episode?
So I really liked this one. I mean, I'd want to watch it again, but I think that also speaks to its quality, is that it is an episode that I'd be happy to revisit. I think that a lot of the things that they've been trying to do over the course of this series, even, but also with the more recent seasons, of finding that balance between telling a self-contained story while advancing the character work that you're doing throughout the season, while also advancing the season-long plot that has been unfolding with the with the DMA in this particular season, and finding that balance between between all of those concerns and between those plots and the main plot, the self-contained story, which we'll get into the details of. It just had that it felt very of a piece with the broader Star Trek universe. Like, this felt like a show that you could put on and anyone would recognize it as a Star Trek show, not just because there's aliens and spaceships, but because of the kind of story that it's telling. And I think that's important to keep in mind.
You nailed it for me. Yep, I was going to say the same thing. It really felt very classic Star Trek, classic tale, classic alien species, classic misunderstanding of Federation values and morals, where we have to solve the primary conflict with actual reason and logic and careful maneuvering of diplomacy rather than just pew pew pew.
Yeah, and with the solution that not everyone on the crew feels comfortable with. Book and Burnham do not agree with how this played out at the end. That does not get resolved. They just have a difference of opinion about how this went down, and that kind of realistic portrayal of characters at conflict with the core themes of the show, that the show is trying to demonstrate. Like, that's something that you'd go back to like DS9 and see, where you have these main characters who you understand their perspectives and you understand the situation that unfolded. You understand why everything happened the way it did and why they each feel the way that they feel. They just aren't going to agree about it.
Correct.
And that felt like a level of emotional maturity that the show doesn't always demonstrate in its writing of its characters. Oh, and I'm sorry, you asked me for a rating. I liked this, obviously, so I'd say 8.5, something like that. I dug it.
Bam. I mean, this is going to be a fun conversation, because when we agree on stuff almost like 1-to-1, I feel like it's so enjoyable. We get to go through and pick it apart a little bit, what worked, what didn't work, but knowing that we're coming into this with all positivity, with all love for the show, like I don't know, I get frustrated on social media with a lot of the backlash towards Star Trek Discovery, and I get frustrated even in our own discussions on Discord, where some folks may say, oh gosh, this is just more of the same, this is more of the same, but it's not more of the same. It's getting to be so good, it's getting to be so engaging and fun to watch, and to as fans, as Star Trek fans, we always get right with things that don't quite make sense, right? Like, there's an entire subreddit dedicated to the science of Star Trek and making things make sense inside the Star Trek universe. So when episode A contradicts episode Z, there's a reason for it. It's not just there. And, over the course of the last 55 years of Star Trek, there's a lot of things that just don't make sense.
Yeah, and especially if, a lot of the folks who are so vehement about the current iteration of Star Trek not feeling like Star Trek, not, they tend to hold like the original series in pretty high regard, as do I, as I know you do too. And like, some of those episodes are goddamn batshit insane.
Yeah.
There's a Halloween special. They go to a planet full of witches, for God's sakes. There's a haunted castle. Like, that show didn't always make sense. That's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like I get what people don't want is for there to be like in the internal logic of the show for there to be things that don't make sense. I get that. And I get that some of the frustration of the way that the storytelling is done and the way that the character work is being done, the focus on certain characters to the detriment of others, all that stuff. Like, fine. But I think it's hard to say, at least for me, that this season isn't so far consistently better than I think the first 5 episodes of the last 3 seasons have been.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah, same.
Just in terms of level of consistency. Like, I feel like each week I've gotten more and more on board with what this season is doing in terms of its episode-to-episode construction and the character work that they're doing and the story that they're telling. So, I'm not really going to shit on Discovery too much so far because, as far as I'm concerned, they're doing a pretty good job.
Exactly. I mean, where criticism is deserved, criticism is given. And you and I are both on the same page, about when this show does so good, it just highlights that they could do better with where they fall flat. And, that's just the nature of reviewing these kinds of shows, talking about it, getting into the nitty-gritty details. We're fans. We're fans first, right? So let's take it from that point of view, everybody. Like, if you're watching the show and you're enjoying it, talk about the things you enjoy. Don't just talk about the things that you don't like. That's boring. Nobody wants to hear everyone complain all the time. And with that, we are going to get into spoiler territory. This is the part where the black alert sound effect comes in, and I edit that in, and it's really fun.
Black alert, everybody.
Black alert. Ian, give me the summary of this episode. The USS Janeway comes into visual range of the DMA.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different stories being told in this episode. One, as the crew is reconciling and reckoning with the revelation that the DMA is artificially generated by all evidence. This kind of sends shockwaves through the Federation and through the galaxy, the quadrant, whatever, everyone who's potentially affected by this. And we get a couple of name checks of the Iconians. We get
a
reference to surviving Iconians. I don't know if there's been an official reference to any surviving in any of the Trek that's come before. Nope. It's sort of been speculated that they might have some remnants out there, but it seems like there are survivors that the Federation can contact.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit to drop in there. We find out that we haven't had contact with the Q continuum in several hundred years. I wonder if that's going to sort of tie into the Picard of it all.
Yeah.
And Q's appearance there. I'm curious to see if that's kind of why that happened.
Yeah, Admiral Vance mentions it's been about 600 years or so, which, based on the time frame, would put that roughly 100 years after Picard's time, if we take that for fact.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Yep, and I'm wondering if that was right. It could have been something that the events of Picard start the ball rolling on. Could be any number of things. I thought it was interesting that it was like so long ago, and thinking back to, I wonder if maybe they picked 100 years out for Picard so that they could keep telling Q stories in the 100 years between.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Between the end of Picard and then, but maybe they left themselves a little bit of wiggle room. But I'd be curious to see if that has some relevance to the story that we see unfold in Picard.
They also name drop the Nassine, which is the race from the Caretakers.
The Caretaker. Yeah. So I thought that was. It was interesting. It was logical. Like, of course, like the first thing you would do is check like all of these super advanced races that you know about who could conceivably have the power to do this sort of thing, and that's what they did. And they've eliminated those options, so they are at a loss.
Yes. It's quite interesting, and it's good that, let's get this out of the way. Let's just name drop it. And I loved how it was done in a classic like briefing room scene.
And the sort of end result of this briefing is two things, or sort of two main plots of this episode. One, there is an asteroid colony that is potentially going to be threatened by the path that the DMA is going to take. There's about, I think, 1,000 colonists on this asteroid colony, mostly this race that we first saw in Enterprise that you mentioned earlier, who I'm blanking on now.
The Akali.
The Akali, thank you. So they've settled this asteroid colony. It's a former Emerald Chain colony, which is relevant because as the story progresses with this asteroid colony, we learn that it is a colony that has a so-called justice system where they make examples out of people. That's where the title of the episode comes from. What they've done is they've essentially exiled, imprisoned for life, I believe, 6 random criminals plucked out of their justice system. Just criminals for anything. Doesn't matter. They were made examples of. They've been sentenced to life in prison, and this prison has been evacuated of guards, but it has not been evacuated of these prisoners. Once Burnham and crew realize this, she decides to lead a mission along with Book to essentially retrieve the prisoners, because this is a Federation mission now, and it's going to be led by Federation values. And one thing that we don't do is what the civilization has done, what the society has done with these prisoners, we don't do that, but we also don't just let prisoners die. Right.
We don't leave people behind.
Right. If there's a tornado heading towards a prison, the whole prison gets evacuated, not just the guards. Everybody leaves. That's just, that's something that even in 21st century America we know. Right.
I do feel like, Star Trek has always kind of held a mirror up to our society. And I kind of thought like there was a missed opportunity here to kind of showcase like what these prison sentences really mean. And, these prisoners were put into prison for life, right?
Yep.
And these were small, petty crimes that they had all committed, save one. So, for these prisoners, they are being made examples, the episode name, made examples of their society to show society, like, don't do anything wrong or you are going to prison for life. Bar none, there is no metric of like, okay, you stole this, so we're going to put you here for a year and you repent and then you come back to society. No, it's just you stole, you're done, goodbye. And I think that could have been showcased a little bit better for our own society, because we do have very unjust justice systems today where, one person's sentence is significantly worse than another's for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, and they tried to make that point a little bit, but you're right, it was a little surface level, which I think if we are going to come up with like a consistent criticism, at least for me, of this season so far, is that some of these things that they try to do in terms of exploring classic Trek themes, some of it does feel a bit surface level. It feels like they could
Yes.
they could dig down a little bit deeper, find another layer of nuance, find another layer of meaning in some of these situations that they put their characters in. That said, I liked that they made this attempt. It certainly felt largely due to, I think, Michael Greyer's performance. It felt affecting. It felt effective. I believed his remorse or regret. Like, I think we can, if we can maybe, question a decision about it. Like, I get that they wanted to give this strong feature role to an indigenous performer. I just there's a part of me that wishes that, like, the one indigenous performer hadn't been the one who murdered somebody. He was the one who was in the prison who actually murdered somebody. Everyone else, like, stole bread to feed their family. The indigenous person murdered somebody. I understand why they had to sort of tell that story with him, and I'm glad that he was featured. But it's like one of those things of, like, oh, we have this representation of someone who we don't normally see represented on screen, and it turns out they're a murderer.
They committed the worst offense possible.
That's
yes.
unfortunate. That's a little bit unfortunate.
It's like, that's not the representation we were looking for.
Yeah. So again, like, I applaud the decision. Generally speaking, it was just one of those things that kind of, like, it just ticked a little. It just stuck out to me just a little bit, just a little bit. But the performance itself and the idea behind it was were powerful ones, and I appreciate that Star Trek went there, because Star Trek should go there.
It should, and it really served as the driving the wedge between Booker and Burnham, who have become so close, right? They have this relationship. They tease each other about it. There's this whole dialogue about when they were doing the courier runs before Michael had linked back up with Discovery, and how they were kind of, dancing around it. They had these feelings, and Booker says, that wasn't fun. And, Burnham's like, oh, well, just getting the job done. And it's very, I love that tit for tat back and forth bit that they have. The relationship feels real. The chemistry is very real. Fans are loving the dynamic. And now we have a wedge being driven, because Booker is dealing with all this trauma, this survivor guilt from watching Kaminar be destroyed. And he's been going through therapy. He's been working on it. And one of the things that he's doing is doing something about it, working towards success. So while the Discovery works on evacuating this colony, Booker and Burnham are able to go off to this prison part, the prison part of the colony, rescue these prisoners, get them out of there. And this is something that, they are uniquely qualified for because of their, it's a small team, tactical, right? They can get in, they can get out with the cargo, aka the prisoners. And this is right up their alley, So they go in, they do the job, but there's issues. It's a prison. You got to disable the force fields. You got to, go past the defenses. And, it's a lot of Star Trek type, action here where...
Yeah, escalating stakes, escalating peril. Yeah, all that stuff worked. It was fine.
Yeah. And, you have these little emerald chain mines that pop up, and they're disguised as
the little
indigenous
beetles.
life forms.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cool. That's the type of stuff that we really enjoy seeing and really enjoy talking about. And then you have, Michael is able to, she's an elite hacker, all right? She's a hacksaw, and she hacks in with a tricorder, and she's able to disable them all. They get in, and, they meet the prisoners. And this is when, we learn the story of each prisoner, and we center on Felix, played by Michael Grey Eyes. He eventually, we learn he didn't just steal bread for his family. He actually killed somebody who showed him a great kindness. And now he feels this immense guilt and remorse. And his punishment, his penance, is to stay in this prison for life. And so he chooses to remain behind on this asteroid colony and ultimately die. And this does not sit well with Booker, because his goal is to save everybody. He needs to be able to save everyone, specifically from the DMA. So when this drives this wedge between Booker, who wants to rescue Felix, and Burnham, who wants to respect Felix's right to remain. Felix has his own agency. He has his own story. He feels that this is what he needs to do to repent. And I agree with Burnham. How can you take someone's agency in that moment?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was the sort of, that was where we as audience members were, I think, meant to land. Not just because she's our captain now and represents, Starfleet and the Federation, and we're supposed to think, the captain's got the right handle on things. But it's completely in fitting with the kind of Star Trek themes that we're starting to explore in this 32nd century that hasn't had a strong Federation around to spread these ideals, to spread these ideas, and to say, hey, we're going to do things differently now. Right.
What I thought was really interesting is, the prisoners basically seek political asylum through the Federation, right?
Yes.
And that gives them the ability, because the Akali colony, with their justice system, they make examples of the prisoners. And if you steal bread for your family, that's not really something that you deserve to go to prison for life. Like maybe a slap on the wrist and like do some community service and receive bread at the end of that community service is a more holistic way of solving the issue. So when the Federation arrives, the colony has been under the Emerald Chain's thumb for so long that they don't know anything else. So the Federation espousing these values, these morals, as you said, is a really key moment in rebuilding the Federation and showcasing to different societies, no matter how big, like Navarre, or how small, like this Akali colony, then they can bring everyone together and treat everyone equally, which is the main ethos of the Federation. We are all better when we all rise together, no matter how good we think we actually are. So these prisoners are able to get this political asylum. They can have their cases reviewed. And what I loved, absolutely thrilled with, the prisoners are brought on board the Discovery. Burnham is in the captain's chair, and the colony magistrate, stomps onto the bridge. Captain, I demand that these prisoners be remanded to the brig. And Captain Burnham just turns and, gives him a classic Captain Picard style speech about accepting grace and humility as they will be arriving as refugees. And they are now on a Federation ship under Federation jurisdiction. So guess what? You must abide by our rules, not your own. I loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our kind of A plot. We ended up going kind of through the entirety of that A plot, but there's a really big B plot going on board the ship.
Yes.
As we follow Stamets, our new character that we get introduced to this week, Dr. Ruan Tarka, the Ryzian doctor who's been leading a lot of the research we learn on finding alternatives to the spore drive that don't require a human navigator, essentially, that don't require a Stamets or a book.
That's right. And this individual, Ruan Tarka, he very clearly states to both Stamets and the book in two separate scenes, so you're the operator of the spore drive.
Yeah.
I don't know, Ian. Do we trust him?
I mean, I think the show is doing it's hard to know. They're being very upfront with this guy. Seems like someone who we're not meant to have a lot of trust in or like very much. And so it might be a little bit too obvious to say we can't trust him. I don't like him very much. That's kind of, I feel like they might be doing like a TV show thing where they're just trying to make us think that. Which fair enough. He's doing a pretty good job of selling himself as someone who's going to be hard for me to trust.
Right. Yes, agree. can't trust him. Very hard to do so. Whether he has good intentions or not, he's just this eccentric, arrogant. Like if he were alive today, he would be on Twitter arguing with people on Congress and saying, "I don't want to pay taxes."
Yep. And it's funny because he has a scene at the very end of the episode with Book, which I really like, where Book sort of suddenly like turns to him and kind of stares into his soul and is like, "You know what's going on. Like you understand."
Yes.
And I had a hard read on whether I bought Tarka's response, because he did open up a bit more than he kind of opened up a little bit more than he has with others, it seems, on this particular subject. I think I take what he says at face value, where he basically says, like, I don't know, but I could have told you that it wasn't any of these other things weeks ago. Like, I know more than, like, he knows a little bit more than other folks are willing to let on. Or than he's willing to let on with a lot of other folks, I should say.
Yes. But, that is a very classically manipulative tactic where Tarka, conveniently opens up a little bit more to one person.
Sure.
It's just one person
Yep.
who happens to be one of the spore drive operators of two on a vessel that Tarka claims is an antique. When he first arrives on the ship, he's like looking around and he's like, oh, okay, this is the Discovery. Oh, what an antique. Oh my God, look, meanwhile, earning delirious looks of like, how dare you talk about our baby like that, from Stamets and Saru and all the other members of the bridge crew.
Sure. And, I can sort of understand where, at least from a design point of view, he may well have been on the mark. We haven't really seen the insides of too many other of these like crazy futuristic ships, but
Sure.
Maybe it was a little bit like looking at stepping onto a ship that on the inside looks like it's from the 1700s and should be sailing the seas under sail, but like on the outside is this like technological marvel and looks super futuristic. And I could sort of see where he's coming from on that side of things, but he's also like, he's just a dick. Like he's just an asshole. Like that's just who he is.
Yeah, exactly. He comes in, he makes no bones about it. He's not apologetic at all. He knows exactly who he is and exactly what he's doing. As soon as they step into engineering in the spore drive and they start with doing their experiment, and I love this scene where Tarka replicates mashed potatoes and a single green pea and uses it as a visual aid, right? And I thought that was kind of a brilliant way to both dumb down the DMA to a level that we could all immediately understand. It's like, explain like I'm 5, right? That's how it felt. And I personally loved it because I'm very much a visual learner as much as I am anything else. So having that aid there for me to understand, like, what is the size of the center of the DMA? What is the actual DMA doing? So having the mashed potatoes be smushed around is interesting, right? And it's also very much a dig at Stamets and Saru, who are like looking on incredulously, like, oh my God, you are going to talk to, one of the most brilliant scientists, admittedly, of the 22nd century, and Captain Saru, wise, elder, sage Captain Saru, and you're going to take mashed potatoes?
Yeah. Have to wonder almost if it was a Close Encounters reference. When he's... Have you ever seen that movie?
I have. That's a great reference.
Yeah, where he's trying to make the mountain with the mashed potatoes.
Yes.
Like, yeah, just it felt like such an odd and specific choice.
Yes. If that wasn't chosen deliberately, that I have a hard time believing that. Ian, you've unlocked something for me. Oh, wow, cool. I mean, this is why I love podcasting, because we think about things in different ways and we connect with different things. It's amazing. The potatoes are the DMA, this accreted material that moves through space, and the P is the device at its center. And Tarka wants to do an experiment to actually recreate a miniaturized version of the DMA on board the Starship Discovery.
Yeah. Which feels like a classic, again, we are playing with some tropes that we've seen before, not necessarily tropes, but just like, stories that we've seen before in Trek of, hey, we're going to do a potentially hazardous experiment somewhere on the ship.
Yes.
And there's going to be some conflict around that.
We've seen this many times before. It's a classic trope because I've seen, reading through social media reactions and commentary about this episode, that's one of the biggest complaints about this episode is like, why would Saru allow this to happen in the middle of an evacuation? We have more important things to worry about than doing an experiment. La 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 la. I'm mad. Downvote the episode. It's terrible. 0 out of 10. And I'm thinking to myself, what about that episode where Wesley and LaForge are firing phasers right next to the warp core?
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Yeah, I mean, it's also it's not really plausible that this ship couldn't be doing these things at the same time.
Exactly.
Like, you've got an entire starship with a crew. You've got a fairly straightforward task, right, in terms of an evacuation. Like, Saru doesn't need to be like... Saru is where he should be, which is like, what needs his supervision, which is this dangerous experiment. That's where he should be, and guess what? That's where he ends up.
He's also got his hand on a kill switch.
Any lieutenant can manage the evacuation. It's just hitting the transport button a bunch of times. I mean, it's not that hard.
Real quick aside, but not just any lieutenant, but Lieutenant Commander Reese is in charge of the actual evacuation. So, it has been delegated.
It has been delegated, and not just delegated, but he volunteered for that, which I thought was a nice little character beat for him. Again, like I felt like about this episode, I like that he got that character beat. I wish that there had just been a little bit more to it. It just felt like, okay, his background reason for wanting to help out fleshed out his character a little bit, kind of like we got that, little tidbit of Lieutenant Oo growing up in a Luddite colony. We get this little, but I just would like a little bit more. It feels just a little surface level sometimes, and I get it. You're trying to service a lot of things, a lot of characters, a lot of stories. Just give some of these storylines, some of these character arcs, like an additional beat or two to flesh it out a little bit, get us a little bit more invested in them, let these scenes breathe a little bit. I mean, again, I keep butting up against the fact that this show is on streaming and it isn't constrained for time in the same way that broadcast television was. And so I just don't understand why some of these arcs, some of these relationships, some of these things can't be given an additional beat or two, an additional scene, an additional couple of lines. Just let the episode breathe a little bit more. Let us get a little bit more invested in these characters so that when they are in peril, even though in the back of our head that we know that chances are we're going to see them again the next week, like, we just care a little bit more because they care and because we care about them. We're more invested.
Right. Missed opportunity to have Lieutenant Commander Reese be front and center for an evacuation scene, dealing with, maybe a family doesn't want to leave their family pet behind and Reese has to go rescue the pet. We could have had a nice...
Have Reese have some direct, have a scene with Reese where he's trying to, again, I know that it's something we've seen in Star Trek before. There's an entire episode of DS9 basically devoted to it with Kira, where a character is having to convince another character that they have to leave, and that they have could have given him a beat like that, again, I know that it's tropey. I know we've seen it before in Trek, but it's still and it's just an example of a way that we could give this character just a little bit more to work with, so that we are a little bit more invested in him, rather than just getting a little bit of an info dump on him in this one little scene. Like, allow some of that to come out a bit more organically through his story.
Yeah. We do get, we get more from Jet Reno, from guest star Tig Notaro on the Discovery than we do our own bridge crew. And I love Tig Notaro, don't get me wrong. Like, she's absolutely hilarious, and this role as Jet Reno is perfect. And, give me more of that, please. But also, it is a little frustrating that we get more from a guest star who they have to build a shooting schedule around, as opposed to leaning into their already established characters that they have all this time with.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the Guinan problem, where you have this wonderful guest star who wants to and deserves to have scenes and material, but they are filling a role where you say to yourself, don't we have a counselor on the ship who could be having this conversation with this character that they're having with Guinan? It's a little bit of that problem.
Right.
But I also just am happy to have her back, so I kind of don't care.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's that juggle.
Like it is the same thing with Guinan, where, that was a character who, when she was having a conversation with a character, I was generally speaking more excited to see that conversation than most of the conversations Troy was having with those characters. Most of the time, that's an issue with the writing, not an issue with either of those performers.
Correct.
But I feel the same sort of thing. Like, yeah, sure, it is an opportunity to give a little bit more screen time to someone like a Reese or a Nielsen. We haven't had that from as much, and now it's going to this guest star. That said, the guest star is on the show for a reason. It's always fun to see them. It's kind of like when Garrick shows up, it's like, it's a Garrick episode. Yes,
yes. And no one complains about a Garrick episode.
You have these recurring guest stars who, in theory, some of these scenes could have been between other characters who we're going to see on a more consistent week-to-week basis, and maybe they should start making more of those decisions. I kind of hope they do. Give us, to go back to Reese for a second, we're complaining how it was a bit of a missed opportunity, but let's not forget that the real missed opportunity would have been for that not to happen at all. The fact that it happened is a good thing, and definitely a step forward for this show in terms of how it handles some of these smaller roles. But I just think that there's more meat left on the bone, that you could flesh out some of these storylines, some of these characters a little bit more with the extra time that you have in the world of streaming.
Yes. Back with Captain Saru, he's got his hand on the kill switch. He's ready to kill this experiment. And this experiment, Tarka sets up, everyone asks him, why can't we just do this on the holodeck? And he says, no, I need real world data to prove this theory. I need to see it in action. I need to see what it's actually going to do, not just a simulation. And yes, 100%, we can't just do everything in a simulation. We can't do everything on a holodeck where the stakes are always set to 0. If you look at the previous episode where Tilly went through this training exercise on the shuttle, you need to actually go through it. You need to actually do the thing. You need the training. You need the knowledge that comes with getting your hands dirty, as Tarkus says. And I definitely respected that. A lot of folks also say, we could have just done this on the holodeck. We did not need to have all the stress. But, what's a TV show without a little bit of stakes? And these stakes were low enough, but also tense enough to build that character tension between them, because you had Stamets, who now is in the midst of this experiment with Tarka, and Stamets and Tarka did not hit this off, because Stamets like he knows that Tarka is using his research, his technology, his experience from the Discovery to lead the next generation spore drive project. But Tarka never reached out to Stamets personally. He never reached out via subspace and said, hey, love your work, would love to pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah, not reached out, but actively kind of avoided him.
Yeah. So now Tarka shows up, just, hey, guess what? I'm here. I'm real. Get used to it, right? And now during this experiment, Stamets is kind of, he's leaning in to Tarka. And, he's practically begging Captain Saru, like, no, we need to keep this experiment going. We need to do this. He's on board.
Yeah, I liked that particular, all of the orneriness and lack of social grace of Tarka aside, there was definitely a strong hint of season 1 Stamets in the performance and presentation of that character, especially with regards to like how singularly focused they were on the experiment and doing the science, and I love that he brought that back out of Stamets.
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned it before on a previous podcast episode where I do miss a little bit of that season 1 Stamets, where he was just a force of nature.
Yeah, that kind of maniacal energy. Yeah, that's definitely something that Tarka's bringing to the table and bringing out of Stamets. And to go back to your sphere builder question, it's interesting because Tarka is able to develop, admittedly he's kind of reverse engineering it because he has the data from the DMA to make this thing. But, once he has that data, he's able to make a small version of it that, in theory, he could have made a larger version of it. He just would have needed more energy than the Discovery could provide to power it. As it was, he needed more energy than the Discovery could provide to power it. It's an interesting thing to consider whether, if that's the case, if building one is technologically feasible, maybe it isn't outside the question for someone like the sphere builders to be behind something like this. It could also be, maybe some weird thing happens with time and a future version of Tarka has screwed up this experiment and has caused the DMA to have, I don't know.
That would be interesting. That would be an interesting thing to take apart.
It does seem like it's being actively guided, or at least, if not actively guided, it seems like it is definitely artificial. Maybe it's out of control. Maybe it's an experiment run wild, that kind of thing. Hard to say, but it's, I'll say this, I don't know what it is. I'm a little bit more invested in finding out the mystery of this season than I was the mystery of last season.
Agreed. I am really enjoying this gravitational anomaly, the DMA, as the main story driver for all of these characters.
Yeah, I think it's a fun mystery, and I'm still in it so far. I hope that they don't drop the ball with it.
There's a scene that gave me chills where Tarka is trying to get a rise out of Saru and yells in his face, and Saru just bellows right back. Ooh, man, that was something else.
Yeah, really interesting. I don't know what makes Tarka tick. He was obviously trying to he was curious about, he had heard about Kelpians and probably heard about what they could do and was just curious. I mean, the guy's a bit of a nut.
Yeah, he does mention that Saru's the first Kelpian he ever met, so I wonder if it's just, he doesn't have that social grace. He doesn't have that, ability to kind of, read the room, so to speak. He just comes in and says what he says and does what he wants because he's an eccentric billionaire genius. I'm saying billionaire because I picture this guy being, the 32nd century version of Elon Musk. And
I haven't quite decided whether he's not able to read these social cues and observe these social graces, or he just chooses not to because he doesn't give a fuck.
Could be. He also does connect with Stamets. I was thinking about my earlier comment where he opens up to Book, and it occurred to me that he does open up to Stamets a little bit as well, because he read about, like, oh, the Emerald Chain put you in a neural lock, and Stamets was kind of taken aback, like, oh, you know about this? And he says, yes, I've heard that it's absolutely excruciating. So there's that little level of camaraderie between them and rapport that Tarka...
And is that what that scar in the back of his neck is from?
Yes, he was an Emerald Chain prisoner at one point in time. And I did have to wonder, Ian, since we're bringing it up now, you mentioned earlier that perhaps Tarka already made this and it's an experiment run wild and it went crazy, this, that, the other thing. You know, what if Tarka was experimenting with something similar, an energy source of some kind, while under Emerald Chain, while under their influence, you know, and he was being forced to work with Aurelio to develop some kind of propulsion system?
Yeah, they do. They also they've name-checked the alternative propulsion system that they're working on. I don't remember what it's called, or the ship that they're using, but yeah, it's interesting. They've name-checked a couple of the sort of in the background experiments and studies that are going on, the research that the Federation is doing, and I'm wondering if some of that's going to come around to be a bit more directly relevant to the story.
Yeah. I think it was back in episode 1 where President Rilak said, yes, we are working on alternative forms, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, there could be something going on out there, and this truly is an experiment run wild, which would be certainly devastating, but less hostile. I am still not 100% convinced that there is it feels like someone's at fault, is what I want to say. But I don't think it's with malicious intent.
And you don't think someone's actively steering it into...
Right.
Thing. Okay.
Right. It's happening. It's doing its thing. It is what it is. And that's all we can say. But yeah, everything going on in this B plot was really thrilling. We have an experiment, a scientific experiment actually occurring on board the Discovery. You've got Jet Reno dropping quips on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is nothing to worry about, and 10 is insane. I give this a 6. It's like, what does that even mean? But I get it, and I loved it.
Yeah, she's always fun. I really liked all of the... Well, I'm a sucker for anything that Saru's involved in, but the B plot, all of that stuff on the ship, you know, it just worked. Again, similar to the stuff that was going on in the prison. I thought both the A and the B plot, the main thrust of this episode, were both working for me. I didn't really have a whole lot of complaints about either one of them. And and we continued the through line of some character work that we've been getting. Culber continues to develop. Sort of, he was on his own.
Yes.
I hesitate to call it a C plot. He's just continuing to do some developing as the show goes on each week. So we're just sort of continuing to follow him on that journey, and I think that's great. I think that speaks to how compelling he is as a performer and a character. I think that the show recognizes that he's a character who the fans care enough about that he can sustain a sort of a solo journey as a sort of a C plot through multiple episodes, and we're on board for that. But he doesn't just have solo work in this exclusively in this episode, because he does have a really great scene with David Cronenberg as Kovach yet again. And I have to say that I think I ragged on his performance from last week's episode a little bit when I talked about it, but I really liked what he was doing this week. So who knows? Again, I think it could come down to the writing. I think maybe this week's writer had a better idea of how to employ his character. And have that kind of Kovach edge that I expect that really wasn't there. It the other week, like it felt like that could have been any character saying those things to Tilly.
Agreed.
It was nice to see him, but it didn't feel very specific to Kovach, and the actual performance itself wasn't exciting me. Whereas this, I felt like was a little bit more the Kovic I've come to expect in a setting that I didn't necessarily expect, a sort of almost a therapeutic setting. But he was right. What Culber was looking for was blunt honesty, which he provided, and it was good stuff, and it framed Culber's struggle for the audience too in a very, very stark way, and I really appreciated that was going on. The show was acknowledging that, like, he underwent a wild and very unique trauma and an experience that, like, nobody else is probably ever going to have in their lives. And so recognizing that reality, recognizing that he's still dealing with that, and that's impacting him to this day.
Yeah.
And he's got this crazy survivor's guilt where,
why me?
It's not just that he survived. He didn't just survive. He came back from the dead.
Significantly so.
All these people are dying, and like he didn't stay dead. Why him? I think it really brought all of that into crystal clarity for both him and the audience, which I like.
Yeah, undercutting that scene, which worked so well, but I felt as though I could not shake that joke from Star Trek Lower Decks out of my head, where it's like, oh, he came back from the dead. We don't talk about it. And like that joke.
We don't talk about that. It's some rough shit. We don't talk about that.
That particular joke kind of took something out of this scene for me. Like it didn't, as effective and powerful as it was, and as great as Wilson Cruz is in this role. That joke just kind of took it out. And that's the kind of thing where it's just a personal connection for me, where sometimes humor takes something away from the seriousness of the situation. And Lower Decks making fun of that trope, it's a trope. And when you step back, from TV, from movies, from film, you're like, yes, of course, we write these things so we can deal with it, in our own way. This is human nature. This is what we do. We move on, but it kind of, it soured the scene for me because
I have a completely different take on it, because I think what Lower Decks is playing with are the ways in which we have handled this before, right? The Lower Decks, both in terms of its aesthetic, but also just in the way it kind of presents, the jokes that it presents. Like, it is very much dealing in this is the way that we dealt with this sort of stuff, or rather didn't deal with this sort of stuff when it happened before. And what Discovery is doing is saying, hey, we're doing things differently. We are taking this seriously. We're treating this as if it has actually happened to you, an actual person, that you are actually having some traumatic shit that you're having to process as a result of this thing you went through. Because in the past, it was like a joke. It was ridiculous. Like how much of a non-issue it was. That's I think my take on it. I certainly never, even if it had kind of made a joke of the fact that characters do have a habit of coming back from the death. I mean, like, we even made that joke a little bit when it happens. Like it's just a thing you recognize in Star Trek. But I think what Discovery is doing is planting a flag and saying, like, hey, here's this trope you're all familiar with, and we're going to treat it a little bit differently. We're going to present it a little bit differently. We're going to give it a bit of a different weight.
I like your take on that. When Culber and Stamets, get back to their quarters at the end of their long day, we have a really nice characterization moment. And we've not had a lot of Stamets and Culber, together. Season 1, we were treated to that lovely scene in their quarters. They brushed their teeth. And then we had that moment in the mirror. Remember? That was wild. And, it feels like we've kind of sort of glossed over some of their day-to-day couplehood life, and we've just kind of
sometimes
dived in.
we got at least one bedroom scene with the two of them chatting about Adira in season 3. There may be one other one that I'm forgetting about, but I think your point's well taken. I think that it's, since we have this couple on the ship, I do like the opportunities that the show takes to show their interpersonal dynamic, their home life, and the exploration of each of their characters that comes through that in the conversations that they have. You get a little bit of Stamets realizing that he has some stuff in common with Tarka, and Culber is dealing with his own trauma and with the realization that the advice he's been giving people about what he presumed was a natural disaster is it's not all invalid just because it's no longer exactly the kind of disaster he thought it was. And he's having to process that as well as his own trauma that he's still dealing with.
Yeah. I found it quite interesting that Stamets, when he asks how he's feeling, and Culber says, "Oh, I'm fine," Stamets says, "Is that like an I don't want to talk about it fine, or is that a real fine?" And the tell is that Culber looks down. It's always in the eyes. He's always looking down. And I love it because that he admits that we are together because we have the same pathology. We obsess over our work, and we're gluttons for punishment, or we're narcissists or whatever. And, it's a little column A, a little column B. And I really liked this characterization moment because, again, we jumped 1,000 years into the future. We solved the burn. We fought out of control AI. We went to the mirror universe, and they still can't figure their own shit out. And, that is a mirror up to society. We have done so much in our lives as individuals, as a society, as a civilization, and yet there's still so much we can't figure out. So it's good to see.
Well, our brains don't evolve with the pace of technology,
that
unfortunately.
Is true. That is true.
We are still having to grapple with our flawed, squishy meat, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with whether you're in the 32nd century or the 22nd century.
I'm still waiting to evolve into a ball of light, please. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
We get some final moments here with Zora. Burnham and Zora. Ian, what's your thoughts on this? In the turbo lift, Zora basically admits to Captain Burnham that she's developing emotions. What is up with this?
Yeah, this show's relationship with AI has always been weird. I don't mean Discovery, I mean Star Trek.
You're right.
It's always a little bit weird that we've always had like a ship's computer that could do all this stuff. That could when you're in the holodeck, when you're Geordi in the holodeck with a hologram of Leah Brahms and she's kind of falling for you. Like that's the computer. Like that's the computer the whole time. It's just the computer. So we've always sort of had this thing that we haven't really acknowledged.
But then you have,
our computers and
across
Star
the
Trek.
galaxy, you have a hologram that develops sentience and, creates his own holographic family.
Yeah, he's an artificial life form who also, it gets into that whole thing of like, does he have emotions, or is he just simulated to have emotions because he's programmed to be a doctor and doctors have emotions? He obviously did a lot of fiddling on his own to tinker with his own program extensively. So, it was clear that he was never meant to be read as a being without emotions in the way that Data was meant to present, or even Spock was meant to present at times. And yet he was an entirely artificial computer-generated life form. So in a sense, a computer developing emotions is kind of nothing new for Star Trek. I'm very curious whether they just sort of have a kind of blasé attitude about this. This is just a feature of this 32nd century Discovery, is that they have a more sentient, living, personality-filled computer. I hope it's not a source of conflict, at least not strong conflict. Like, I think it could be an interesting thing to navigate. I think there could be, as another character of the show, the ship could develop a bit more of a personality through this Zora voice, and that could be an interesting dynamic to explore in the future. But I hope it doesn't become a whole we've already fought a bunch of AI that were hostile. Like I don't need that crap. I don't need that again.
There's a big contradiction.
I really hope they don't go down
There's a
that
big
road.
contradiction in presenting Zora as an AI on board the ship so soon after we just dealt with the whole control fiasco. It does feel a little like, oh, you know, we traded one for the other.
Right. We're just supposed to believe that, you know, this one is going to be benevolent for reasons, I guess.
Reasons. Well, remember, Zora is a evolution of the sphere data that has ingratiated itself onto the Discovery ship's computer. So the ship's computer, you know, that we know, you know, computer working is no longer. My Alexa device just woke up. That's funny. As we know it, you know, it is no longer that. Now it's the sphere data acting as the computer and is developing its role on board the ship. So it goes back to the sphere data that we met in Season 2, Episode 4. And there's still so much that we have yet to unpack from that episode alone.
Yeah, I'm curious whether they do fully address the origins of Zora and what's been going on in terms of her integration with the ship. How much control? I mean, this is the computer of the ship. We're meant to believe. So you know, it's got a distinct personality, but also could just decide to turn off life support if they develop the emotion of anger.
Sure. And this also unlocks a big situation where if Zora admits, you know, these emotions are a recent development, you know, we express regret, you know, what happens if, you know, Captain Burnham, you know, orders the ship, you know, super close to a dangerous, you know, right up to the DMA, and Zora's like, you know, that's me you're talking about. I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, that's the whole point of, you know, not having a fully conscious AI in charge of your ship, because the ship has to, at the end of the day, be sacrificable in a way that the lives of those on board it are not. And when you can no longer make that distinction, some of those decisions that a captain has to be able to make are taken off the table. Like it's that's a tough situation. That conflict would be interesting to explore. That's some conflict, like not a Zora is trying to take over control of the ship and is a threat that needs to be overcome, but the ethical dilemma that comes naturally out of, okay, this ship is now sentient. What do I do about that in terms of making my risk assessment?
And back to Season 2, if protecting the sphere data was so important, if it was so important, and we allowed the sphere data...
It was most important to keep it away from control. That was the most... And that was
exactly. And now it has melded with the Discovery. Why are we allowing the USS Discovery to jump to all these, you know, cataclysmic events to save the day if the sphere data was so important and now it's part of Discovery? I understand that control is out of the picture, but it still feels like there's, 10,000 years worth of knowledge and data to unpack?
I did not assume that all of that data remained on board Discovery. Like and admittedly, I don't think this is something that has been made explicit by the show, and if it has, you know, folks can correct us. But I believe that the jump to the future out of Control's, grasp was the thing that ended that threat. And once that threat was over, that sphere data was then safe to disseminate to Starfleet.
Right.
And I sort of just assumed that was done. That you know, once the sphere data was brought into the future, it was threats in the past, literally, and we can now redistribute this sphere data without worrying about it getting into the hands of Control. I was never under the assumption that Discovery was the sole bearer of this torch.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And you're probably right. I'm sure that, you know, in Season 3 somewhere, there must have been a throwaway line when they arrived to Federation headquarters. But that's the thing about this show sometimes that I get a little frustrated with, is that they set up these big tentpole situations and, you know, it becomes kind of blasé after the fact.
Yeah, it's been a little strange the way they've rolled out the sort of Zora of it all in the first place. I mean, we had the sort of little hints of emergence in season 3 that were sort of just treated as like, okay, I guess our computer's just becoming aware of itself. Like, I guess that's just a thing that's going on in the background of this entire season. And it did feel very much, like I don't want to say an afterthought. It just didn't seem like a properly developed theme. It seemed like, I don't know how the writer's room, or if there even is one, works for Discovery, but it felt like there was this like Zora written up on the whiteboard, and they kept having to figure out like how to get her into season 3. Maybe because they knew what they were going to do in season 4, roughly, with this thing. So they were like, well, we gotta introduce it in season 3, and so they just kind of did it in the most backgrounded, sort of cast off, tossed off way they could. It's a little bit strange, I have to say. I'm curious to see if this is something. I have to imagine it's something that they are going to continue to develop now that they've made such a point of it.
Yes, it's going to be really hard to ignore the fact that Zora is being left out of the storyline if they continue to go down the route that they have in the past with just dropping notes about Zora into episodes. Ian, this was an awesome episode. We touched on just about everything. Is there anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I think we touched on most of the things, if not all of them.
Yeah, I am saving this one part that I really enjoyed. My personal standout moment, if you will, was when Captain Burnham met with the individual, the daughter of the man that was murdered by Felix on the prison planet. So he gives to Captain Burnham an orb, a Lalogai orb, which is basically the family tree, and that he had accidentally stolen from the man that he had murdered. And, that robs that family of their family history. So, he carried this great guilt. He stayed behind on the asteroid colony, and he paid the ultimate price that he felt he needed to. But before he did, he passed off this orb to Captain Burnham, who then delivers it to the daughter. And they have this wonderful, touching family moment. And it was just a lovely scene, and it was very effective for me. Just a random, in the background character, she's pregnant, she came off this colony, and, she receives her family lineage. So out of the death of the colony comes this new opportunity for this individual. And it felt like a very classic Star Trek moment. You could easily see that done in The Next Generation. You could easily see that done in Voyager. And kudos to the writing room for including that.
Yeah, that was a nice way to wrap up that story.
Did you have any...
And I think they're continuing to give...
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, they're continuing to give Michael these opportunities to just go ahead and be the captain, and she's doing fine. I think that the new dynamic that they have, where they're kind of, she's almost like a co-captain with Saru. I know the chain of command isn't exactly like that, but he's just in charge when she's not around, or can go off and do his own thing and be trusted to run his thing, and she's off running hers, and it all the dynamics just feel much more comfortable. There's just less friction because of the built-in conflict to the show, where she's the main character but isn't in charge of anything.
Was there any big standout moments for you in this episode? What really connected? What felt like it worked so well, it's just sticking with you?
I think Felix's, maybe it wasn't a specific scene, but I was very affected by his performance, his story, his remorse, his guilt. I believed him. I understood the choice that he was making. I understood why he was feeling that way.
Yeah.
And I thought that stood out to me, as well as the Kovich and Culberson.
Yeah, really good stuff. Really good character work all throughout this episode. And this has been a great great conversation talking about the examples. One thing that I am a little concerned about, this is episode 5, and in previous seasons of Star Trek Discovery, right about episodes 6 and 7 is when the story starts to turn from what they've been doing and they start chasing after the main plot line, and the pacing gets a little weird. So I am nervous that the pacing will once again get weird and things will randomly speed up and slow down until the penultimate episode leading up to the finale, where we'll get treated with this wonderful exposition directed by Jonathan Frakes, and then the finale will leave us feeling a little bit colder than we had hoped. But I am optimistic. I feel good that the story is going to lead in a great way.
We haven't seen Frakes pop up yet. Do we know which ones he's directing?
I don't know, and I would have to go deeper into my notes here or the IMDb to figure out if he actually directed an episode or not. Usually they publicize that pretty quickly early out, but I haven't heard much.
I'm 90% sure he did at least one. He always does.
He always comes back for something. But yeah, no, this was great. I'm loving it. I can't wait for our next episode, which will be a Christmas special. We'll be recording sometime over Christmas. We may have some special guests depending on scheduling. We may have some scheduling conflicts. But let's keep the conversation going for sure. Folks, you can connect with us at Starfleet Pod on Twitter and Instagram. We are a part of the We Made This Network. Check us out at wemadethisnetwork.com, where you can find other related podcasts talking Star Trek or the Marvel Universe. Spider-Man came out.
Hell yeah. I pop up on all these shows too. You can hear me on the network on Real Talk, talking about movies, current releases on Podcast 616, talking Marvel, and The Way. I've got a Star Wars podcast talking about the Book of Boba Fett coming out in just a week.
That's going to be great.
Yeah, looking forward to that too. Got a lot that we're talking about this time of year on the network.
I'm not a big Boba Fett guy. I never was. I never really understood the connection. So I'm excited to listen to your podcast to kind of, maybe I'll catch the bug. I'll catch the Boba bug. Who knows? Ian, thank you. It has been wonderful. Let your neighbors know. I'd love to come over and party with them anytime.
Oh my God! Did you hear that? Oh man, sorry. I can't hear that in my headphones.
It's all good. All right, folks. So we are going to take off. We will see you next week. Hope you enjoy this episode. Please give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting platform. Feel free to drop us a note. You can also email us at wearestarfleetwmtr. That stands for We Made Treks TR @gmail.com. Folks, thank you so much, and live long and prosper.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Rarely Going, an animated Star Trek podcast. I wonder if we're far enough into this to really figure this out yet. But it feels like with animation you almost have a little bit more of a license to reflect and look back than maybe they feel they can do. Although, Picard is obviously very nostalgic, but
stylistically it's very different though. It's not your father's Picard, even though it is the same actor.
The TARDIS crew.
Donald Sumpter is amazing. I love the fact that he just pops up. He just pops up. Probably Rassilon. Probably.
Well, they do confirm later on he is.
I think they do.
Yeah,
don't
he
they?
says on Rassilon the Redeemer.
Of course he does. Bloody hell!
And he has the gauntlet as well, which gives the hint at that.
Yeah.
I'm nodding profusely.
Yeah, we're very proper classic Doctor Who as well. A lot of it as well. The law.
Chucky Vision.
Well, everyone wanted it, but I still wasn't sure truly whether or not Devon was gay, or, well, he might also be bi, but interested in Jake in a romantic way at least. And, oh, my heart. It was physical, Dev. I was like, oh, and then I cried. Did I mention I cried? I'm not even remotely embarrassed about the fact that I cried twice.
It was very special.
You didn't cry, did you?
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.